Marcus walked into his manager's office on a Tuesday in late April with a single printed document. Not during his annual review, not because he'd been called in. He scheduled the meeting himself, 6 weeks in advance, labeled it a check-in on my role and compensation, and showed up with 1 page of numbers. His manager, a director named Craig, looked at the sheet, set it down, and said he needed to think about it. He came back 3 days later, a $9,400 raise, effective the 1st of May. Marcus didn't get that number because he'd outworked everyone else on his team. He didn't get it because Craig suddenly realized he was underpaid. He got it because Craig did the math on what it would cost to replace him, and the math didn't work in Craig's favor. The document made that math impossible to ignore. Most people never build that document. Most people walk into a raise conversation with a feeling, and feelings don't move budgets. Here's what moves budgets. 8 months before Marcus's meeting, a product manager named Tyler went into his annual review at a software company in Austin with a very different approach. He'd had a strong year by any honest measure. He'd shipped a major API integration in Q3, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. He'd stabilized a client relationship that had been escalating for 6 months. He documented everything. He prepared. He walked in confident. His manager told him the team couldn't function without him, said his work had been exceptional, called him one of the department's most reliable contributors. Tyler left with a 3.5% raise. That's the average merit increase for 2025, according to Salary.com compensation data, barely above a flat line once inflation is factored in. Tyler had done the math heading into his review. He had expected something between 7 and 9%. What he received was what the budget line said, decided months before he walked in the room. Tyler's mistake wasn't his performance. His mistake was bringing performance to a negotiation. Performance gets you kept. Leverage gets you paid. Here is how a company actually decides what to give you. By October, most organizations are in annual budget planning. Finance is modeling compensation costs for the following year. HR is setting merit increase pools, a fixed percentage of total payroll allocated to raises across the entire company. That pool gets divided among managers who rank their people and allocate each employee a slice of a fixed total. The process runs October through November. Numbers are finalized before January. Results are delivered at your annual review in the spring. By the time you walk into that room, the number has already been decided. The review is not where raises get negotiated, it's where they get announced. Tyler sat across from his manager in March and made his case. His manager nodded, thanked him, said he appreciated the context. None of it changed the number. Not because his manager didn't believe him, because the budget was locked 4 months earlier and nobody had gone back to finance to change it. A Pew Research Center survey found that 55% of workers never attempt to negotiate their salary. Among those who do, 66% get at least part of what they ask for. The negotiation works. The problem isn't the ask. The problem is when and how most people make it. There is a meeting happening somewhere in your company right now between your manager and a compensation spreadsheet where your salary band and your replaceability have already been calculated. The number they've agreed on has nothing to do with your last performance review. To change it, you have to act before it gets locked, or give your manager a reason compelling enough to reopen a closed decision. That's what Marcus did. That's exactly what Tyler didn't do. To change that number, you need 3 things. Not a feeling, not a tenure argument, not a competing offer from a company you had to fake interview at and might not even want to work for. 3 specific things formatted on a single page that make the business case so clearly your manager has no intellectual room to say no without looking unreasonable. The first is quantified wins. Not "I've been a great contributor," numbers, the exact outcomes your work produced. Revenue your work generated or directly influenced, cost you saved the company, hours recovered for the team, projects delivered on time or early, client retention tied to something you owned. If you can attach a dollar figure, attach it. If you can't, attach the consequence. Before I took over this project, X was happening. It no longer is. Tyler's document listed his wins by name. Marcus's listed them by dollar amount. One was a story, the other was a case. The second thing is your market rate. This is the number your employer is counting on you never looking up. The current salary range for your role, your experience level, your city. Not when you were hired, not what the range was 3 years ago, what it is today in the market right now. Levels.fyi, LinkedIn salary, Glassdoor, the job postings your company's competitors are actively running. In states with pay transparency laws, the salary range is printed directly on the posting. Use it, screenshot it, print it, bring it into the room. Your market rate is not an opinion, it's a number on a job posting your company's competitors published this week. Marcus's document showed a comp range of $94,000 to $112,000 for his role in his metro area, sourced from 7 current postings at comparable companies. He was earning $96,000. The midpoint of the range was above what he was making. That's not a feeling, that's a number Craig had to respond to. The third thing is scope creep. Since the day you were hired, your role has quietly expanded. You've absorbed responsibilities that were never in your original job description. You've covered for people who left and weren't replaced. You've taken on adjacent work because you were capable and available and nobody stopped you. You've been doing more than one job's worth of work on one job's salary, and this is the one item almost nobody documents. Make the list. What were you hired to do? What do you actually do today? Attach a market rate to each additional responsibility. Then close with the sentence that changes the entire conversation. I was hired to do X. I am currently doing X, Y, and Z. I am only being compensated for X. That's the document. That's what changes the raise conversation from a favor being requested to a transaction being negotiated. But here's the part nobody tells you, and it's the part that determines whether any of this actually works.
You don't need a competing offer. You don't need to interview at a competitor and hope they come back with a number before your review window closes. That move has power, but it also tells your manager you're already 1 foot out the door. And some managers interpret that as the door being open. There's a cleaner version built into the document you've already made. But even with that document, even with the numbers, the market data, the scope inventory, there is one thing that kills more raise conversations than any wrong move inside the room: wrong timing. A perfect case at the wrong moment is still a no. Tyler's manager wasn't indifferent to his performance. He wasn't hiding budget from him out of spite. He was a manager operating inside a system where the compensation decisions for the year had already been made in a room Tyler was never in. Tyler brought his case to a ceremony. He needed to bring it to a negotiation. Here is how the budget cycle actually works and how to position your conversation inside it. October through November, annual budget planning. This is when merit pools get set. Your raise budget for the entire next year is a percentage of total payroll allocated at this stage. It's a number, not a flexible policy. Once it's set, every manager's hands are partially tied. December through January, numbers finalized. HR locks the merit recommendations. Exceptions can happen, but they require escalation and justification. Most managers don't go back. February through March, performance reviews delivered. The conversation happens. You receive the number that was decided before Christmas. The manager says, "This is what we could do this year." They mean it. That is what they could do inside the system as it was already structured. The window to influence your number is before it gets locked, or in Q1 and Q2, when companies run mid-year adjustment cycles and discretionary headcount budgets are occasionally available. The right moment inside that window is after a visible win. A project just shipped. A client publicly expressed satisfaction. The team closed a strong quarter. Your numbers went up. That's the wave. That's when you schedule the conversation. There are also 3 moments you should never use. When your manager is visibly under pressure, restructuring nearby, leadership change, budget cuts in motion. Right after a high visibility mistake on your part and at your annual review, unless you've built the case in advance and your manager has already signaled the number is negotiable. Tyler asked in March. The decision was made in November. He was 9 months too late. There was someone else in Tyler's company who understood the system. Her name was Jordan, senior data analyst, same organization, 2 years into a role that had grown considerably since her first week. She'd absorbed the responsibilities of 2 analysts who left the previous year and weren't backfilled. She was doing the work of 3 people on the salary of 1. She knew this. She'd just never documented it. Jordan spent 2 weeks in October building her document. Her quantified wins, a reporting infrastructure overhaul she'd built in Q2 that recovered 11 hours a week for her team. She'd calculated the hourly rate, multiplied it by the team size, projected it across a quarter. The number was concrete. Her market rate. She pulled data from LinkedIn Salary, 2 Glassdoor entries, and a pay-transparent job posting from a direct competitor listing $87,000 to $103,000 for her role. She was earning $82,000. The market floor was above what she was making. Her scope list, 6 responsibilities she'd absorbed that were nowhere in her original job description, each with a rough market rate pulled from comparable roles. She didn't schedule the conversation in March at her review. She scheduled it in February, 2 weeks after the company announced a record Q4. She framed the request carefully, not, "Can we talk about a raise?" She sent her manager a calendar invite titled, "Role Alignment and Compensation Check-In." Her manager opened the meeting the way managers always open these meetings. "Just so you know, the standard merit increases have already been processed for this cycle." Jordan didn't push back. She didn't escalate. She said she understood, and then she said this. "I appreciate that. I wanted to share some context on how the scope of my role has changed and what the market looks like for this function. I thought it might be useful for the mid-year review cycle." She slid the document across the table. Then she stopped talking. 3 weeks later, Jordan received an $8,500 raise, a 10.4% increase, plus a modest equity grant. Her manager had gone back to finance with her scope document and the market data, framed it as a retention risk, and made the case for an adjustment. Finance approved it. Jordan made it easy for her manager to say yes and uncomfortable to say no. Jordan didn't fake interview anywhere. She didn't threaten to leave. She made staying cheaper than replacing her. Have you ever gone into a raise conversation relying on how you felt about your year and walked out wondering where the math went? Leave it in the comments. Here is the framework underneath everything Jordan did. A raise is not a reward. It's a transaction. And like every transaction, it has 2 sides. On one side, what you want, a number. On the other, what the company is buying, your continued engagement, your institutional knowledge, your decision not to take your profile public, your decision to stay. That's what they're purchasing with the raise. And until you've agreed to stay, the price is still open. Your manager will say the number is policy. They'll say merit increases are finalized. They'll say they need to check with HR. These are not walls. They're trained responses, the first move in a negotiation, not the final answer. Jordan's manager said increases were done. 3 weeks later, additional budget appeared. The policy response is designed to stop people who don't have a document. It was not built for someone holding market data, a scope inventory, and nothing signed yet. One more thing. Anchor high. The first number said in any negotiation is rarely the final amount. If you ask for exactly what you want, you'll be countered below it and end up below where you started. Ask for a number above what you'd accept, not absurdly, but high enough that the middle ground lands where you need to be. Name the number clearly, then stop talking. Silence after a number is not weakness, it's discipline. The next person to speak has just moved. And when you book the meeting, use Jordan's framing. Not, "Can I talk about my salary?" Not, "I feel like I deserve more."
Book it as a role alignment and compensation check-in. That framing signals you're bringing data, not emotion. It signals your manager should come prepared, not defensive. That's the conversation worth having. Tyler found out what Jordan received 6 months after his annual review. She mentioned it in passing on a Slack call: the timing, the document, the mid-year adjustment. She wasn't comparing, she assumed everyone with a strong year had done the same thing. Tyler had not done the same thing, and his next annual review was 9 months away. Your salary is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of your last negotiation. And the negotiation doesn't start when you walk into the room. It starts when you decide whether to build the document. The next time HR tells you merit increases are finalized, ask yourself one question: finalized by whom and when? And were you in the room when they decided what you were worth? Getting the raise is one thing, but there's a move some employees make in the weeks after. A move that either accelerates everything or quietly marks them as someone who's become difficult to manage. And how your manager behaves in the 3 months after you negotiate tells you more about your future at this company than the raise itself did.